Welcome to the e-commerce growth show, brought to you by Segmentify.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to e-commerce growth show. Today we have a privilege to present you Mr. Luka Gabrovšek from MasterCard Slovenia. He is a business director and he will present us a new reality. What is the most important role of digital payments. So Mr. Gabrovšek, the stage is yours. Welcome. And thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Alexandra. Happy to be here. Unfortunately, this time from my basement, not in a good auditorium. This conference always had, I think, the best auditorium setups in Slovenia. So it's really unfortunate. But look, I'm looking for next year's when things normalize, hopefully. Yeah. So, yeah, thanks for this opportunity. Well, I will speak about the role of digital payments or electronic payments in this new world. So let me start first with, with the image of the deep space antenna. So this is something that was created like 50 years ago. So why am I saying this? So like 3 or 4 days ago, the news broke out that NASA again re-established the contact with Voyager 2 probe after some lengthy repairs to this exact antenna that's on picture in Australia. So 43 years ago, running on plutonium cell, the Voyager probes were launched, 2 of them, and they're producing approximately 200 watts of power, which is kind of equivalent of a laptop power adapter. And they are now approximately 17 light hours away. So this is like billions of kilometers, but they can still communicate with Earth with this ancient technology. So imagine that when being frustrated about poor Wi-Fi reception, for example, from your next room. And why am I mentioning this? So it's a technology that's basically frozen in time, but it still performs flawlessly. So it still works. We can still communicate with the probe. We are gathering data. And back then in 60s, 70s, I think patience was far greater than it is now. So people were willing to invest and to really wait for the results for decades. I don't think now is the same situation. So today we want everything to evolve fast, to develop fast, to react fast. But at the same time, we are also looking at some trends that are developing really slowly, and they're just walking beside us, and we don't even notice the development. So why am I mentioning this in terms of so roughly at the same time, many other inventions took place. Like one of them is digitization of payments, or electronicization of payments. Sorry for the word, but basically they moved from paperwork or cash or sending really let's say offline data from bank to bank to a network. And this changed business drastically. So actually it became obvious that payments are actually an enabler for commerce. So I'm moving to the next slide, where I want to emphasize how much payments and commerce are interlinked between each other. If payments are enabling commerce, so without payments, there is zero commerce, because you cannot exchange goods for some mean of value. Commerce is also in the same time driving the payments evolution. So whatever commerce needs, payments will adapt to support commerce, because at the end, they want to walk the same path of evolution in terms of supporting some new business ideas on how to basically create value for merchants and for the consumers themselves. So as said, as payments evolved, we were looking at a lot of trends. So here is just some things that I just put on the table, what we are actually monitoring, where we see a big change. And some of these things are really evolving quickly. Like, I don't know, contactless is one of the most, let's say, successful innovations where in few years it completely changed people's habits how to purchase goods. So if like 3 years ago, it was still weird if you did not hand out your card on the point of sale to the merchant and you wanted to keep it in your hand and tap yourself. Basically today, after 3 years, the habit changed completely, and it's really strange if somebody wants to pull your card from the hand. So this is one of the examples where innovation really came quickly, but others tend to follow really slowly, like conversion cash to electronic payments. It goes maybe 2 percentage points per year. The transformation is such, and we are just walking along and seeing cash losing a bit of an appeal, but still having it in a lot of ways that we are doing business. And I want to challenge that, or at least I want to see it through the prism of this crisis of pandemic, how things are changing. Are they changing quicker now, or is it just an anomaly and the trends will return to its established paths? Moving on. So again, sticking to the trends, basically one of the, let's say, most obvious trends is bridging the gap, that trade-off between user experience and safety or security within payments is trying to do. So we always were looking at this trade-off. So either you had really nice, really comfortable user experience for payments, but it lacked security, or you had very good security while the user experience suffered. So if we tackle that successfully in the physical environment, so the normal tapping of the card on the POS is basically ultimate user experience. Okay, it can evolve a little more with the wallets and things like that, but it's already here. So it's very secure and very convenient. We still have a gap or the obligation to boost or to bridge this gap in the e-com space. So there are several, let's say, drivers that are pushing the evolution in e-com space, and one of them is for sure PSD2 regulation. So it's very much aligned with the current needs of the pandemic. Unfortunately, the PSD2 regulation, which kind of dictates how the security should be tackled within the proper user experience. And the tech is following, so the PSPs, the banks, the merchants, everybody's getting ready to boost the user experience on e-com to accommodate the PSD2 requirements. Basically, the trends are here, and right now, right at the end of 2020, a lot of things will change in the e-com space when it comes to strong customer authentication of transaction and so on.
Sorry for interruption, but only for the audience who will hear this for the first time. What is exactly PSD2, please?
Payment Service Directive 2,
okay.
Basically EBA, the European Authority for Payments, created this legislation or a regulation that was implemented in the local laws throughout the European Union member states, and this requires certain evolution or certain adaptation of the current technology and the current way of how transactions are being authorized. So it requires every transaction to be strongly authenticated. What strong authentication? Maybe some other time. Okay.
Okay.
So what we saw is a lot of technology being developed for this to accommodate this PSD2, and a lot of technology became obsolete. So we are just striking it out, and at the end, as an end result, we will come to a better user experience with higher security. And how does it go? So as said, these trends are usually very slow. So we are, let me just give you some examples. So we were experiencing, for example, growth in cross-border traffic. So people were traveling more and more, and cross-border traffic was, so cross-border payments were growing a lot faster, I'd say, compared to domestic spend. Another trend is that basically the ratio between POS payments and ATM withdrawals are slowly coming to the favor of POS payments. So the transaction value, so average transaction value is dropping, but really slowly, like from 22 euros to 21 euros in maybe 2 years time, the average transaction value, I mean. And we were kind of following these trends and anticipating the future, and then the pandemic hit. And maybe one more interesting thing. So 2 years ago, I was having the presentation in e-commerce day as well, and this was my slide. So maybe that middle part, we were predicting that in 5 years' time, 20% of the traffic will go on e-com. So let me say that when the pandemic hit, these trends went out of the box. So we really don't know, are they new trends or are they just an anomaly? It depends also on the duration of the pandemic and everything. But I strongly suspect that some of these things will be here to stay. So mentioning this 20% to be reached in 2022, let me just say that in April this year, we have reached 50% in 2020. Of course, it was just a spike. But now, looking at the second wave, we are coming there as well once more. So let's see where the numbers takes us. But 20% in 2022, we can easily say that this is going to be breached already this year, and I'm almost positive that it's going to stay. So that this ratio is going to correct itself very much quicker than we have anticipated by following the trends, the slower trends that were kind of seen in the last decade or so. Okay, so moving on, maybe where are we now? So again, we are facing a huge lockdown everywhere, not just in Slovenia. So and it's a problem because people are not traveling, and it's a huge deal within payments industry, because international payments are one of the key drivers of the industry itself, the tourism, the cross-border shopping, and so on. So we see a lot of messages that these lockdowns are actually just being enforced. So it's not like in Slovenia, where we got used to it in 2 weeks' time. I think it will get a little worse before it gets better, and it heavily impacts the decision making. So I guess that you all had the chance to participate in the April experience, where a lot of, so here another example how the pandemic is now again growing, or how the new cases are evolving. Everything is becoming now red, and second wave is definitely coming. It's here already, and we really don't know how long it's gonna last. We have some positive news yesterday about the vaccine, but you never know about these things. It may take an additional year. In actually, what we had in July, August, we had a lot of presentations done, what happened during and after the pandemic. And it's amazing looking at 3-month-old presentations and seeing those words like after the pandemic. And we are now hit with the far greater one that happened in April. So we need to be careful here. But from the business perspective, these are really important questions. Will it take long? Is it the last one? And so on. So if the reaction of the business is crucial. So again, coming back to the trends, if we scale down this one that I just displayed and try to see what's coming, so let's try to predict which trends are going to stay and which trends are not really new trends, but are just the anomaly. So I have written some pointers here, and I will try to discuss each one of them and see. I don't want to make too much of a prediction, more than maybe put some food for thought in your mind, how this could impact your business and how can you react to the new reality. So is it is it speeding up change, or will the change be as slow as it was? For sure, we can agree that the changes will be faster. So an example could be that a lot of people that never did e-shopping now got used to it. And since e-shopping or e-commerce is in some ways, of course, it is superior to a physical or the shopping that like we did from the 50s onwards, of course, the change will stay. So a lot of people will use their payment mechanisms, the delivery options and everything to buy certain goods online from now on. So moving your business online or omni-channel, I think this is the obvious choice. Domestic or cross-border? Will cross-border return? I don't know. So will people get used to being at home, spending holidays at home, or suddenly at the end of pandemic, everybody will rush across the border once more? Let's see how the travel industry recovers, what will be the airline situation with the ticket prices and so on. But this one is for sure interesting to me, and I don't have a clear answer. Moving on to cash or electronic payments. So we have seen the sudden shift to electronic payments. First of all, cash is kind of inconvenient for certain services now. For example, food delivery through the aggregators like Vort or eHrana. They are operating now almost exclusively on electronic payments methods. And this is also changing people's habits. So people are getting used to being food delivered and not paying delivery, but paying on order because it's much more convenient. Then you just step out and collect the bag and you're done. So once you onboard yourself as a consumer, and that was the major hurdle to basically set up the app and everything, you are one click away of ordering and buying the food. And this is the superior user experience that is making cash kind of obsolete. Of course, some industries will still be cash driven, but if we look at the aggregate picture, I think electronic payments will be kind of heading the commerce from beyond 2020. E-com or physical? That's again very clear answer. So e-com will get a tremendous boost, and it will be here to stay. It's almost the logical thing. We were a lot of time we were maybe just browsing on the websites, but then we still came to the store and buy the goods, or vice versa. But now I think e-com has evolved in just 6 months so much that basically even buying food or buying like really stuff that you know, like dishwasher powder or something like that, is becoming more and more normal if you just order it online and getting it delivered. So I think e-com boost will remain even after pandemic. Mobile or desktop, for sure, everything is adapting to mobile. I was kind of skeptical of this because I was always the one who liked to browse and everything, do it basically on a bigger screen. But now I see that there are some advantages of mobile that are clear advantages in terms of login, in terms of payment, in terms of authentication, which is coming to mobile in a biometric way. So I think mobile commerce will have additional boost to what we were already witnessing as a slow trend. Okay, pay online or pay on delivery, more and more is paying online being accepted. So the risk or the perception of risk is getting lower and lower. Merchants also like to be paid online prior to the delivery because there is certain logistics and resource advantages for that. So I guess that online payments compared to paying on delivery will also get tremendous boosts. And one interesting thing which popped into my mind, it's not directly related to payments, but how do we perceive marketplace compared to the specialized shops? So are you as a merchant forced to go to a marketplace to sell goods, or do specialized shops have a light of day? I don't know, but I talked to a lot of guys about this. And basically, if you know what you're buying, then marketplace is fine. If you want to buy, let's say, very specific good or high-end stuff, then you need to visit a specialized store. It's simply much more narrowed selection to what you really want. So it depends on how much you know what you want. This is also very interesting part of how to position your business. Is it okay to just place it on the marketplace, which is easy, but it costs some money? Or you create a special shop, you need to do different kind of marketing, you need to set up the payment methods and everything, but at the end, you might get better result with that, or a combination of both. I don't know. So it depends on the business itself. So moving back to where we try to get, so all the drivers are improving the e-commerce in both, let's say, key metrics, security and UX. And actually, these drivers just got accelerated by the pandemic. So I guess that e-com, if you're not on e-com, if you were not making a shift in April, and you kind of wiped your forehead, okay, we got through it in August, I think you have the same issue now, and it's only a matter of time before you become an omni-channel merchant, I guess. So I think the key reaction points for this pandemic are that you need to react fast. You shouldn't wait. You have to go online, and you have to adapt the business model. And you have to make sure your payments work, because without payments, there is simply no commerce. That's my contribution, and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you.
Alexandra?
Yes, I have several questions. Actually, what would be your advice to business who are now changing, let's say, in this second way and still haven't done properly in the first way? What is actually the biggest mistake that some of the companies or let's say managers have done wrong or didn't consider before the second wave?
Well, if you ask only about the biggest mistake, I would just say the gap or the time gap, because when there is a gap, people will turn to other merchants who are selling basically a competitive good. And if you get used to having a good experience at the other merchant, basically you can lose a customer for good. So react fast, even if the solution is not perfect. I think fast reaction, if you're not online today, you should be. So I can give you a concrete example from April, where a hard good store like Merkur was already ready, while Bauhaus, for example, was not. And from a lot of experience, I kind of know that this was actually a good position to be in for Merkur, and quite a shitty one for the one who is not, because it's hard to set up an online store just from deciding to having it live. So it takes months. Of course, now they are live, so they reacted, but that's one very specific example that shows how important this is, that the management did actually react. Then you have some other examples. I just don't want to name everybody, but this is truly important. Go online as fast as possible. Even facilitate the marketplace options if you don't have other capacity.
Okay, you mentioned also at the beginning that at this Voyager 1 and 2, that this technology had frozen in time, 20 years ago when they launched them. Mm-hmm. So is
43.
Oh,
I
yes.
know, because I'm 43.
We were quite young at that time. So should be this kind of, let's say, era that we are living right now, these two waves, or if there's a third wave would follow, that this will be also kind of a frozen in time era, you know, and we don't know if we will manage to move even faster after this, everything is over. We hope so.
I mean, as said, I think some of the trends will return to its normal, but some of them are surely staying. In terms of commerce, for sure, e-com will get a tremendous, let's say, marketing campaign because it's solving a lot of issues. Imagine that e-com wouldn't be here in the first lockdown. Some of us couldn't even go and get food. Yes. So it's essential, and it's becoming from a nice to have to essential. And when the things become essential, then money starts pouring in even more, and the opportunities come, and innovation is faster and everything. So it's just getting a boost. So I don't think it's changing the outcome a lot or even at all. So eventually we would come to this situation because electronics all around us are basically driving our habits to change. This just accelerated it a lot, not just a bit.
Okay, and here is also the last question for me. In the beginning of the presentation, you mentioned that in a transaction value was dropping, you know, from 22 to 21. So do you have kind of data, what is transaction value now, or let's say in the first wave at least? How much was it?
It depends on the channel. So there are a lot of metrics behind it. And if I just generalize, it's around 23, but it doesn't really matter because this is just for cards and you have types of cards. It's more of the dynamics. And the interesting thing is that the transaction value now is getting higher and higher. But it's, I think, more because of the consolidated purchases in the physical stores. So we are going less frequently and buying more stuff at the same time. And this one is, I'm almost positive about this one, that this one is not gonna stay. So when the things normalize, everything will come. So we will again be purchasing more in terms of what we need in the moment, not having really thought throughout what our bag will look like in a week's time, and then went and fill up our trunks of the cars with the complete purchase. I'm just saying that maybe I'm just deducting something out of the transactional data, but this is usually correct. So we can really transform what the data of the transaction is showing us to the actual, what's actually happening in the economy. But as the trend, as said, I think this one is the one that's going to return, and the transaction value will drop again to the levels that we were seeing before the crisis.
Okay, and going to balance our lives again, right?
I mean, and you will spend more maybe for coffee in a bar instead of buying a big pack of coffee and cook it on your own. Yeah.
And to see your friends physically again.
Or not. You can have Zoom sessions on Friday instead of going to the restaurant, right?
And next time we will do a video recording.
Hopefully that one doesn't stay.
Face to face together sitting. Yes, definitely. So thank you so much for sharing all these trends, experiences. It was really our privilege, and also warmly invite to next session when you have something like this. So
thanks a lot for having me.
Yeah, thank you. So ladies and gentlemen, dear followers, enjoy us also next time with next session at eCommerce Growth Show. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.